my purpose is to instill creative confidence around me to achieve the extraordinary.
Hello, and welcome to another Sparks Talk from the Global Innovation Forum.
I started my career in advertising, and I've worked for around 6 years with Leo Burnett and Havas Group. Then I moved to Bacardi in 2012. My mission is to actually help individuals conquer their creativity imposter syndrome. Creativity is not just innate, it's a muscle that you can nurture and fuel every single day. You have to follow through, you have to execute, you have to prototype, you have to measure and evaluate, and you have to iterate and push forward beyond the worry and really lead more with your curiosity as opposed to really being worried. Carve time out, have the space, and really push yourself to get closer to those creative objectives.
If there was one thing that you would say they can do to be more creative following on from this, so what's one thing they can do in the next 24 hours? Tell us a little bit about how you got started with all this. What's led you to be so interested in creativity?
Yeah, great, thank you. So I started my career in advertising, and I've worked for around 6 years with Leo Burnett and Havas Group. Then I moved to Bacardi in 2012. And I think if I can just break down my journey, I think 2018 was like a big tipping point for me, because that's when I started the self-discovery and really try to understand what makes me tick and what's my purpose in life. And I think after a couple of iterations and a couple of conversations with friends to just see if they really see me actually doing this and if they see me at my best when I do this, I got into a lovely statement, which is honestly guiding me every single day. And my purpose is to instill creative confidence around me to achieve the extraordinary. And being clear on this purpose really helped me trailblaze like the jobs that I want and really create some of the jobs that did not necessarily exist before at Bacardi. And one of them is, Next Gen Idea Lab, which is our internal incubator, where we give a voice for everyone to actually come up with innovation and creative ideas. And it doesn't just sit with the R&D department. Yeah. And after this, I started my journey with disruptive innovation, which was absolutely an amazing space for us to, again, bring innovation to life within Bacardi. And currently, I'm back into marketing because we just put a small pause on the disruptive innovation space, given the economic crisis, which I'm sure you can relate to that. And that's when I wanted to become more intentional about creativity. And apart from just reading amazing books about creativity, but I really wanted to start a creativity coaching certification and share some of my learning journey on Instagram through the Curious Typewriter. And voila, that's me.
Amazing. So now you're sharing all this amazing sort of build-up of knowledge and experience and expertise as a coach, are you? That's the sort of part of your mission.
Yes, correct. My mission is to actually help individuals conquer their creativity imposter syndrome, which is a huge, challenge that we currently have. So I'm really hoping I can, just bring some impact and some value to everyone who's part of this community on Instagram. My simple definition of creativity is the ability to actually connect the dots differently and create original ideas that bring meaningful work or meaningful impact, whether this is on the innovator or the person who is creating those ideas, or on the community around them and how this impacts the community around them. So that's my, very simple definition of creativity. There's a theory which talks about the 4 C's of creativity, and I'm going to explain those in simple terms and like examples you could relate to. So the first one is the mini C, right? So it's the tiny C of what exactly you do every day through your life that is creative. So whether you use, like a mug as a pen holder, or whether, you just repurpose some of your things differently. So that is the mini C. Then after this, you have the little C. And the little C is really about, an example of this would be, I'm preparing lunch. One of the ingredients is not available in my pantry. Can I substitute this by something else? So this is really what the little C is about. Then we move into the big C. The big C is about big contributions and lasting impacts. For example, what Marie Curie did with her radioactivity kind of theory and approach. So that is a big C. And the last C, so 4 in total, the last one is about the pro C. And this is where usually artists, scientists, all of those professional creators and creative people bring their inventions to life. So when I talk about creativity, it doesn't have to be like the pro C that we're talking about. It can
Yes.
be the mini C, the little C, the big C, any C, as long as, we are driving or aiming to really challenge the status quo and add our expression and bring it to life.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the progression, though I would hazard that there maybe should be a medium C because it feels like a long way from cooking with a different ingredient to Marie Curie. But I get the point, which is it's a spectrum, right?
It's a
And
spectrum.
we are all creative, are we not? I think that's my belief that in different ways. But a lot of our audience are creative. They're creative or need to be creative in a professional capacity. So, what is the argument for creativity at work? Why is creativity important, full stop, but particularly in work?
Yeah. Well, so many reasons why creativity is important, but maybe I'll start for those who, are probably a bit more analytical and they love some stats. So maybe I'll try to share some of this. So if we look at the skills needed for the future based on the World Economic Forum, right? The top 3 skills involve creativity. So, skill number 1 is about problem solving. How can you solve problems if you're thinking of the problem from the same space of where the problem was created,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So, you need creativity in problem solving. And the second skill is about analytical thinking. And you do also need to maybe connect the data differently to get new insights and then create. And the third skill needed for the future is creativity. So if we're actually, not focusing on this skill, then how will that happen? And how do we bring it to life? But additionally, um, a survey was done again by, I believe, by the World Economic Forum, and they surveyed around like all the top senior leader at the top of the pyramid, right? And 90% of those senior leaders said that in order for us to be competitive in the future, we do need creativity. So that's the top part. We go to
mm,
the middle part, and you ask like the workforce, do you guys want to bring creativity to life? Do you want to bring your full creative potential to work? 75% of them said absolutely yes. Now, it's a bit of Instagram versus reality, right? So reality versus expectation here. Only 25% of them are actually bringing their full creative potential to life. So the gap is huge. And we have to find ways to bridge their gap, and we have to find ways to upskill everyone. And actually, 6 out of 10 workers need upskilling before 2026 to actually have that creative thinking again, and they rewire their brain to think creatively again. So the business case is there,
yeah.
it's not like it's a nice to have, it's a must have for us to really be competitive and to become a living business who will continue to stay relevant in the future.
Yeah, and I imagine that you would also see a very low portion of people being trained in creativity, right? I think it's one of those things that businesses sometimes talk about. We need creativity, but they're not necessarily sure how to enable creativity because it doesn't follow the usual business process. Well, maybe you'll tell us it can, but I think businesses are used to putting in place structures, and actually what you're talking about is looking at things in new ways, connecting things across different data sources and the like. So yeah, it'd be very interesting to see how many of those businesses were training as well.
Absolutely. And I love what you said, Tom, around how do we train people to be creative, because that is the number one myth that we have to debunk in the like in the corporate world, right?
Okay.
And many people say that you're either right brain or left brain. That's
Yes.
the first myth that we
Yes.
need to debunk. Creativity is not just innate. It's a muscle that you can nurture and fuel every single day. So it can grow if you are intentional about growing that muscle. It's a bit, I love what Josh Linker talks and says about this point specifically, is creativity is more your weight than your height. Creativity is more your weight than your height. It fluctuates. And if you actually fuel it, it grows.
Yeah, I love that. And to me, as someone who sometimes tries to control my weight, I know partly that's down to what I do, but also my environment is very important, and where I am, how busy and stressed, and we know that stress reduces creativity. So it's a lovely analogy. I love that, and I think, as you say, that's the biggest myth. If we leave people with one message, it's if you think you're creative or you're not creative, it's a muscle. You can train it.
Exactly. Exactly. And there are so many other, myths that we can probably share with the
Yeah,
audience to
love
help
me.
them debunk some of those. So we just said the first one is creativity is innate. And what we're saying now, it's not really innate. I mean, it can be, but it doesn't mean that, you can't nurture this muscle and grow it further. But the second one, like many people think that creativity is spontaneous, like, oh, it's a light bulb moment. But they actually, and it is, it is when you have those ideas or the spark of ideas, they happen all of a sudden. But it doesn't mean that the creator or the innovator did not build their knowledge first. So
Yeah,
building your knowledge first is the first step to actually allow those ideas to germinate and to start really popping in and really sparking your attention. But the third one that I want to talk about, which I honestly struggle with, is when people tell you, oh, creativity is just the job of a marketeer or the job of the ad agency or the innovators. But
yes,
I'm in supply chain, it's not my job to be creative. Or I'm in finance, it's not my job to be creative. Or I'm in HR, right? What I want to say here is that everyone needs to be creative because everything is changing around you. So, what used to make sense before might not make sense now. How do you actually empathize with your audience and what's happening out there and connect with them in a
yeah.
better way? And this requires creativity as well. Um, so
I
I
love
think those are
because I mean, creative accounting has a bad name, but I know what the point is it's not that you can't be creative. Some kind of element of your job will require that, and
yeah,
there's and you were in advertising, so I'm sure you'll have heard of Dave Trott, but he said creativity is the last unfair competitive advantage. As businesses, as organizations, can you be more competitive? Can you be more creative than your
creative.
competitors?
Mm,
I think that's a real advantage that businesses should be, as we came back to, training and
totally.
enabling. So,
Totally. And just the last point on the myth, and then we can move on
I love
from this. But the last one, which is so important for innovators as well, given that we're not just talking to, creativity within the art realm, etc. But many people think that creativity is just about like coming up with those ideas and generating those ideas, but they stop there. And I think
Yeah.
what's so important is to also be aware that creativity needs to go to the execution. So it's not just the fun part of coming up with those amazing ideas that will spark so much like attention or like interest, but you have to follow through, you have to execute, you have to prototype, you have to measure and evaluate, and you have to iterate. And this is part of the creative process and not just the first generating idea piece.
I could not agree more. I'm sure you've been in plenty of ideation workshops where you kind of have these amazing ideas, and it's often the ones that there are some sort of ones that are sort of obvious take forwards, but are probably easy and less distinctive, let's
Mm.
say. Um, Whereas the ones that are kind of new and interesting, they require work, they require nurturing, and you want that time afterwards to say that's the interesting thing. Work on that. But I
Mm.
think so often in those things, people go back to the day job, and it's such a shame.
Yep.
It's not just about the spark. It's I don't know. It's probably attributed to Einstein, but 1% creativity,
Yes.
or 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration.
So true.
So, what are some of the barriers maybe that leads us to at work? I mean, what are some of the common things people are running into that at work prevent them from bringing their whole creative self or feeling
Mm.
creative?
Mm. Yeah, I think some of those barriers are probably linked to the individuals, and some are linked to the organization or maybe the structure or the governance, etc. But maybe today I'm going to start like try to focus a bit more on the individual, because
Yes.
I'm sure in your other series you probably covered like all the challenges for innovators in terms of like governance, etc. But I think the number one challenge is worry and fear, right?
Yes.
And I love this statement from Walt Disney, which says, worry is a waste of imagination, right? Like you spend so much time like worrying and really thinking of all the things that might go wrong, which is good, and we have to do this, but you have to go beyond and push forward beyond the worry and really lead more with your curiosity as opposed to really being worried. And I think for this one, maybe for the audience, if they did not read the book of Amy Edmondson, she's an amazing Harvard professor, but she wrote a book around the right kind of wrong. And she
Yes.
talks about intelligent failure, right?
Yes.
And and this is all about really like pursuing the path that like keep going and keep exploring and take all the knowledge that you have. But intelligent failure is about like the valuable information that you get through this experiment, and there's no other way for you to get it if you did not experiment and you did not really try. So again, going back to the challenges, number one is worry and fear. And I think linked to this, there's a lot of self doubt as well. Like,
Yeah.
the way we talk to ourselves. So self doubt and self talk, like, should I go ahead and do it? Am I good enough? Like,
Mhm.
should this actually be the next step? So reframing some of this self talk and some of this like narrative, that voice that we keep hearing more than any other voice,
Yeah.
is super important for us to keep pushing forward. The third challenge is comparison.
Yes.
Comparison is your worst enemy. Like, we keep comparing ourselves and saying, but this person is more entitled to do it. This person actually better. It doesn't matter. It's comparing you to you a year before. And I think this
Yes.
is super important. It's the only comparison you need to do is with your past self, and that's it. So forget about like, all the others. And the fourth one is perfectionism.
Yeah.
Like, we will never try anything until it's perfect. And luckily, I think there's a lot of drive now behind proof of concept and MVP and prototyping and all of those things, which is amazing, and it really helps break down the barrier of perfectionism. And I keep talking about progress over perfection. It's all about the
Yes.
progress. It's all about that 1 inch that
And
you've done better?
I think there's been a rise in perfectionism. I've seen some data on that, and I think as a parent, we've probably got quite a lot to answer for. It predates social media and the like, so it can't just
Yeah.
be laid at the door of Instagram. But um, no, I think that that's such a valid point, and the comparison. I think again, innovators are often saying, so we want to be like Steve Jobs or, like Apple. I mean, it's great to set your sights high, but to your point on the C's, it's a spectrum. Not everyone can create the iPhone, and even Apple are struggling to create the next iPhone, right? So
Mm.
I love that. Comparison is the thief of joy.
Yeah.
Maybe we can talk about some practical tools. I know you had some things that you wanted to share,
Yeah.
Layal.
Yeah, for sure. So I think the first behavior which we probably need to start shifting a bit is more around like self-discipline, and this is more for those who are really excited and who really are intrigued to build that creative muscle.
Mm,
Discipline is so important. So for us to be one super clear on what are the creative objectives that you want to set for yourself,
yeah.
and that you will be so disciplined about every single day, regardless if you're in the mood, regardless if you feel like I'm getting that divine inspiration, regardless if you feel like, oh my God, this is so bad, like I'm not actually making any regardless, carve time out. Carve time out, have the space, and really push yourself to get closer to those creative objectives. The second tool that I want to talk about here, and you touched on this, Tom, keep it simple with small steps.
Yes.
Um, I think the moment you actually create micro goals and smaller steps for your creative journey, the less resistance you're going to have to actually, I love this emoji, the less
Yeah.
resist. The less resistance you're going to have to actually achieve those goals. I think it has been proven, and I love, by the way, this book called One Small Step Can Change Your Life, and it's all about the Kaizen methodology. And for
Mm,
those of you who are not familiar with the Kaizen, it's all about daily progress and daily improvement. In the past couple of years, we heard so many like disruptive and transformative, etc. I think we're, to your point, we're focusing so much on the proceeds that we're ignoring all the cumulative incremental innovation and incremental things that we can achieve and value that we can bring to the table.
it's atomic,
So that
well, isn't it? That sort of theory of just a little
absolutely.
improvement every day.
Absolutely. And for that, maybe I can share, some really like a really simple tool that maybe you can ask yourself every day. Like, again, small question every day. Like, what can I do differently today? Right?
Yeah.
What small act of creativity or self expression can I engage in today? Or what learning opportunity I need to seek today. Like keep
Mm,
those questions so small. Your brain loves small questions, and they will not like he's this guy will not resist small questions. So even if it's smaller answers, but with time and with discipline, those will help you create bigger leap of
yeah.
change that you really want to achieve. So first thing, have creative goals. Second thing, be disciplined about those. Third thing is small questions and really, really keep it simple. Fourth thing is so important. This is curiosity.
Ah,
How many times during the day you feel like, oh my God, I'm really interested to know about this. And then you get distracted. You get
yes.
distracted by this, you get your
Yes.
phone, you get distracted by an email, you get distracted by Teams. So many distractions, right? And I love this statement saying, distract the distractions. You have to distract the distractions to actually really achieve your creative goals. And the way I do it, and it worked for me, again, I'm not saying it's the only way, it's a way. Feel free to experiment with it. I have this little guy, my notebook, with
Yes.
me constantly. And if I have like a curious whisper that comes to my mind, but I don't have time to actually go and experiment with it or see where this is going to take me, I just write it down here. And when I have the time and the space, as part of my discipline every day, I go back and I do my research and I do my homework. So this is, yeah, curiosity, super important. And really listen to this curious whisper that you're getting. And the last point that I'm going to talk about is play. We are growing in a society where play is just for kids and play is not for corporate behavior.
Yeah.
And I think we need to change that narrative. And instead of just playing the devil's advocate in meeting, which is one way, shift this narrative. Play the news reporter on the street who's interested to know more about consumers and ask the right questions.
Yeah.
So I think those are very quickly, with the time that we have today, the tools that I wanted to share with everyone. And I really hope that you will find them useful and experiment with them.
I love small questions. I'll absolutely be building that in. And you use the phrase a curious whisper. To me, that goes back to the point you made about myth busting, which is creativity just happens. You're actively building these layers of understanding. It reminds me, sorry, I am going to now compare to Steve Jobs, but him going off to that class on typography, and then of
Yes,
course when Apple comes out, it has beautiful typography. That doesn't just come out of nowhere. That comes out of him being curious, and we can all practice that curiosity because it's fun, right? It's also
it
back to
is.
play. It's fun to know, about these things that catch our attention. Layal, that's
Absolutely.
such a wonderful, albeit whistle-stop tour. And I do urge people to follow Layal on Instagram, The Curious Typewriter. It's a really, I've really enjoyed it. And maybe just if we can leave the audience with, if there was one thing that you would say they can do to be more creative following on from this. So what's one thing they can do in the next 24 hours? What would that be? What would you think would really give them the most bang for their buck there?
I think that's a really difficult question because there are so many things I want to talk about. But if there is just one thing, I would say be intentional. Be intentional to actually grow this muscle because
Yes,
it's extremely fulfilling and extremely rewarding. And the outcome that you will see, the change you will see in yourself is just absolutely phenomenal. So
fantastic.
intentional.
I love that. And I love that thought about it, like your weight, not your height, in a positive way. Let's grow it.
Yes.
So, Layal Baaklini, thank you so much for coming to talk to us at Global Innovation Forum as part of these Spark Talks. It's been such a pleasure having you here. And to the rest of you, to our wonderful audience and community, thank you for tuning in, and look out for more of these to follow.